I'm Mark Stanley and my IoT business is Thingitude. We work in the UK mostly with local and national government, helping them to understand the potential for IoT and making service delivery more efficient, and most importantly improving the quality of life for the people they serve. And I love it. I have a small team, we have a lot of fun, but we take our work very seriously and try to make sure that the bulk of our effort is spent tackling real and pressing problems that affect an identifiable group of or community, and that we can solve or significantly improve with IoT and smart technology. This is a talk about an IoT project we've been running with the University of Reading to help students feel safer around the town, particularly women students at night. Now, as a man who is, let's face it, more in my autumn years than spring, the safety of students may seem like a strange topic for me to be concerned about. Perhaps you might expect someone that, with my considerable experience, to be more naturally turn their focus towards tackling the issues of older people. For example, trying to reduce the number of falls at home among older people, which massively impacts quality of life and costs a fortune in care provision. And funnily enough, that's where this story begins. So in the county of Berkshire in England, the local councils have deployed a LoRaWAN network across the county, and they ran a competition for business to tackle the problems of older people falling over and injuring themselves. Thingitude led a consortium bid, and we won the competition, and that gave us 100k funding, with which I was able to grow the team and hire Tracy, who was she was 19 at the time and taking a year out before going to university. Reading Council then launched another more open competition, and it was just generally tackling pressing issues with IoT. I liked the idea of another 100k, and so we tried to come up with a proposal. Tracy suggested something around personal safety for young women. She shared some of her experiences as a young woman in town, particularly at night. How she'd missed the bus and couldn't afford a taxi, so she had to walk. About the lads' banter that had left her shaking. About being followed. About being approached by creepy guys. About being new to a town and not knowing the dodgy areas. And about having to call her brother to get her to walk her home because she was too scared to walk alone. Tracy wanted to use sensors and an app to help women feel safer in town and find safer routes home. I had some reservations. For one, I didn't know of any creepy guy sensors, so I was worried about what we could actually achieve. I was also worried that women getting their phone out at night might make things worse for them, if they're waving around an expensive iPhone. Although Tracy had first-hand experience, she is just one person, so we did some more research to better understand the problem area and figure out if and where we could help. Here's what we learned. So in Reading, the police, this is in 2019, the police received over 2,000 reported crimes of a violent or sexual nature. Less than 5% of crimes get reported, so we know that the real number will be much higher. We found that at the university, they'd set up a Facebook group specifically to help women walk home together at night. Now that group's got 3,000 members in it, so we know that a large number of women are concerned around this. Tracy surveyed 50 women students, and we took the results from the university back to the university and to the Students' Union, and they agreed to take part in the trial if our bid was successful. So it was clear that the safety of women students is a real and pressing problem, and it stretches beyond Reading. In fact, compared to other towns and university towns, Reading's relatively safe, but this is a problem around the world. So you can see, there's quite large numbers of people affected by this. So we decided, we can do something with this. So we put together a proposal for a student safety app that we called My Way. We submitted a bid along with a letter of support from the university, and I'm pleased to say we won, which is probably why I'm here today. So we'd found a real and pressing problem and identified a group of people it affected. Now, all we had to do was, solve or significantly improve it. Now, if you build it, they will come. That might work for baseball grounds and maybe IoT conferences, but it doesn't work for apps. There's no point building an app if your target audience won't use it. And students have a low tolerance for crappy apps. You have to really understand your user. And among women students, we know there'll be different groups with different needs and concerns, and we want to address, the common pain points amongst these groups. So how does an 18 to 21-year-old woman student feel about personal safety living in Reading? Well, unsurprisingly, 18 to 21-year-old women students aren't interested in talking to middle-aged men about personal safety. I'm just not relatable. At best, I guess I'm like a dad figure, in which case they're the ones reassuring me that they're fine, and we're not getting to the real meat of the problem. So we take solution design seriously, and I need our designers to have honest and deep conversations with the users in order to design something that actually meets the real underlying needs. So I hired Millie, who I knew when she was an apprentice and is now, was then a brilliant 21-year-old UX designer. Millie led the design phase with Tracy helping and me in the background. This women-led team conducted user interviews and went through a well thought out co-design process with a group of women students from the university. What you're seeing on the screen is some of the outputs. I particularly like this one, inform but not terrify the students. And that became a bit of a mantra for us because we could get hold of all kinds of data, but we needed it to be useful to the students, and we needed them to be able to filter out the stuff that was just noise for them. So while the design was going on, the rest of the team concentrated on building the app and the sensors. Tracy helped with some of the server-side programming and had this sort of overall role of making sure the app that we were building actually met the intent of the design. So, having established good rapport between the students and our designers, we set to work building the first release with several review points with students to make sure we were going to produce something they'd actually use. We got permission from the council to use their streetlights for our sensors, so we strapped the sensors to the streetlights and started configuring enough sensors to cover around 120 streets, ready for a soft launch with our friendly students. This is the pink area on the map that you can see, which covers every street in the town centre, out around the university campus and all the main student accommodation areas. The sensors collect a range of data, such as people movement and lighting levels, and then send it over the SmartBark's LoRaWAN network. We take the sensor data and we add in crowdsourced data which pinpoints live issues such as fighting or if there's a creepy guy who's been approaching women. We put this data onto a map in the app so that the users have a live view of where's busy in town and the dodgy areas to avoid that night. Then the first COVID lockdown hit us, and suddenly there was no nighttime economy and, sadly for me, no students to keep safe. The only plus point of the lockdown was that the streets were empty, so it meant we could install the sensors more quickly. I'd always felt as well that the data from our sensors could be used in multiple ways, not just for personal safety. And open data is a really important concept for smart cities to embrace. I felt that if we collect the data through lockdown, we might get a really interesting data set, especially when rules relax, because it would show, how people were coming back into the town and where. We used an open data platform called Urban Data Exchange. And we publish live data on people movement and street lighting levels so that the councils and academic researchers and anyone else interested can use our data. Eventually, the lockdown was lifted and we were able to run our first live trial in September 2020. The trial showed us that students liked the app and proved that it actually worked. We knew that the students liked the Take Me Home button, which is a single push to give them walking and bus directions home from wherever they are in town. And they really loved the feature that automatically sends an SMS to their mum to let her know when they've got home safely. We also learned a few things that confused the users. Obviously, it's a trial, and we found out that it was too slow for them in some places. So there were improvements we could make based on real feedback. What we couldn't know was whether the students would keep using it, because unfortunately after 3 weeks there was a second lockdown and another miserable year with no in-person lectures or nightlife for the students. But those 3 weeks we did have gave us, and more importantly the university, enough confidence that we had something worthwhile. So together we did a full launch at Freshers Week 2021. Which brings us now into 2022. The first full year of My Way went very well, and we know that students continue using the app way beyond the first couple of weeks. We know from feedback that with My Way we've made a significant improvement for women students. One bad thing that also happened was a big increase in drink spiking. So we've added a new feature that makes it easy to report and allows us to build upon a heat map of dodgier bars and clubs in town. The police have heard about this and have asked us to provide them with drink spiking reports, which is really useful intelligence for some of their own operations, trying to make the streets safer for women. We're happy to help, and it's easy for us to add extra data feed into the Urban Data Exchange platform. Reading Council have also got interested, and recently they secured extra funding, which is really exciting because it means we can make My Way available to everyone who lives and works in Reading, not just to the students. We'll need to make a couple of adaptations, obviously. So things are looking good, and I'm hopeful that more universities and towns will join us in making the place feel safer and more welcoming for women and other people who feel vulnerable, especially after dark. Personal safety is a concern for universities, towns and cities everywhere, and it's often reported in the media. It is a real and pressing problem for a large portion of the population. Sadly, until men change for the better, or someone really does invent a creepy guy sensor, then solutions like My Way offer some peace of mind and practical support for personal safety. I hope you found this talk interesting. I'm happy to take any questions about the project, about co-designing process, software development, or how to explain IoT to psychology students, things network coverage in Berkshire, anything you like. Thanks very much.